2001 was a weird, beautiful mess for Marvel Comics. The company was barely surviving the aftermath of the 90s bankruptcy crash, the editorial room was in total chaos, and the vibe was basically, screw it, let's see what happens. As we keep pushing forward through our series tracking every single Marvel event ever, we finally landed right here in 2001. And today, we're dropping into 3 specific times Marvel completely threw out the rulebook, from an absolute panic button X-Men story, to an Avengers epic where the villain actually won, to the time they forced their entire creative lineup to just shut up for a month. Let's get into it. By early 2001, Marvel was getting ready to hand the X-Men over to Grant Morrison for what would become the legendary New X-Men run. Before that could happen though, they had to clean up a bunch of lingering storylines. Scott Liddell returned for one last 4-month run to tie everything together, and the result was Eve of Destruction, which ran through Uncanny X-Men 392 through 393 and X-Men Volume 2 111 through 113. The story picks up after Colossus sacrifices himself to cure the legacy virus. Magneto sees Colossus' death as proof that Xavier's dream has failed. Instead of creating peace, Xavier's ideals has just gotten another mutant killed. So what does Magneto do? He marches into the X-Mansion, kidnaps Xavier, hauls him back to Genosha, and publicly crucifies him in the town square while forcing him to wear a power-dampening helmet. Just to make sure everyone gets the message, Magneto goes on television and practically invites the world to challenge him. Normally, this is where the X-Men show up and save the day. The problem is, there really isn't an X-Men team at the moment. Most of the roster's overseas, searching for Destiny's missing diaries. Cable and Shadowcat have retired, Angel is off on vacation, and the only people left in the mansion are Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Wolverine. That's it. While Cyclops and Wolverine sneak into Genosha to rescue Xavier, Jean has to throw together an entirely new team with almost no time to prepare. The lineup she comes up with is one of the strangest in X-Men history. She recruits Northstar from Alpha Flight, then telepathically forces former acolyte Joanna Cargill to join the mission. After that, she drafts 2 random civilians, Omerta, whose mutation makes him invulnerable but doesn't do much for his personality, and Wraith, who can turn invisible. Sunpyre joins because her brother passes on the mission, and Dazzler suddenly drops in with news that baby versions of Apocalypse have taken over the Mojoverse. Jean basically tells her, we'll deal with that later, loads everyone into a Blackbird, and heads straight for Genosha. Things go about as well as you'd expect. Magneto blows the jet out of the sky, captures the team, and forces them into a showdown. When Dazzler stands up to him, he appears to disintegrate her without a second thought. Cyclops and Wolverine jump into the fight, and Magneto tries to repeat one of his greatest victories by ripping the adamantium out of Wolverine's skeleton once again. Except this time, nothing happens. That's when everything falls apart for Magneto. Xavier had actually been rescued hours earlier by a double agent, while Jean had been keeping Magneto distracted with telepathic illusions the entire time. The Dazzler Magneto killed was only a hard light hologram, and the Xavier hanging on the cross was actually Dazzler using her light powers to disguise herself. Magneto realizes he's been outplayed, but he refuses to surrender. Wolverine finally ends the fight the simplest way possible, by stabbing Magneto in the stomach and leaving him bleeding on the ground. The makeshift X-Men team disbands almost immediately afterward, and the story closes with Jean, Scott, and Xavier quietly sharing a drink back in the mansion. Fans have never been especially kind to Eve of Destruction, and I can see why. A lot of readers saw it for what it was, a fast transitional story meant to clear the board before Morrison took over. Most of Jean's temporary recruits disappeared almost as quickly as they arrived, and Magneto being defeated with a single gut stab felt pretty underwhelming after everything that had been built up. Like I said, I get those complaints. The whole thing feels rushed, and you can tell Marvel is trying to wrap up as much as possible before the next era started. But I still think there's a lot to enjoy here. Jean having to build an X-Men team out of whomever happened to be available is a fun premise, and Magneto spending the entire story getting fooled by one giant telepathic con is genuinely satisfying. It's messy, it's weird, and it's clearly trying to get from point A to point B as fast as possible. But there's something entertaining about just how committed it is to the chaos. Next up is one of the biggest Avengers stories ever told, the Kang Dynasty. The 16-part saga ran through Avengers Volume 3, number 41 through 55, along with Avengers Annual 2001. It's written by Kurt Busiek, with artwork from an impressive lineup that included Alan Davis, Kieran Dwyer, Ivan Reis, and even a young Rick Remender on inks. Comic book villains try to conquer the world all the time. What makes the Kang Dynasty stand out is that Kang actually succeeded. He becomes the first villain in Marvel history to physically conquer Earth without relying on mind control, reality warping, or some cosmic shortcut. He wins through planning, technology, and overwhelming military force. The story begins with Kang and his son Marcus, the new Scarlet Centurion, arriving at the United Nations. To show he's serious, Kang fires a blast from his enormous sword-shaped orbital fortress, the Damocles base, and vaporizes the UN headquarters. But before the blast lands, he phase shifts everyone inside to safety. Nobody dies. It's his way of proving that his technology is so far beyond Earth's that he can destroy the building while choosing exactly who lives and who dies. He then projects a vision of Earth's darkest possible futures and tells the world leaders, "I'm conquering you to save you." Kang's real brilliance shows up in his strategy. He announces that any nation or faction willing to conquer territory in his name will earn a place in his new empire. Almost immediately, Atuma's Atlanteans, the Deviants, and all other hostile groups launch attacks across the globe. Kang knows if that he invades Earth directly, humanity will unite against him, so instead, he gives the world a reason to fight itself. While the Avengers race from one crisis to the next, Kang launches his full-scale invasion from the 30th century. The Avengers eventually try to strike back by attacking the Damocles base, but the mission falls apart. Captain America and several heroes end up stranded in deep space. Back on Earth, Kang seizes control of America's Sentinel defense fleet and uses one of his future weapons to wipe Washington, D.C. off the map, killing millions. With no realistic way to stop him, the United Nations formally surrenders, and Wasp is forced to hand control of the planet over to Kang on the Avengers' behalf. Of course, that's not the end of the story. The stranded heroes find their way back to Earth, while the remaining Avengers escape captivity and take control of a network of defense towers originally built by the Master of the World. As the resistance begins to grow, the final battle erupts. Captain America uses advanced technology to project a skyscraper-sized hologram of himself into space, where he squares off against an equally enormous hologram of Kang, before shouting, "Now you miserable jacked up little tin Hitler, let's end this." The Avengers finally breach the Damocles base. Warbird destroys its power core and the massive fortress falls out of orbit before crashing into Maryland. Kang survives the crash, walks out into the wreckage, and demands the warrior's death he believes he's earned. Captain America accepts the challenge, defeats Kang in single combat, and takes the Conqueror into custody. The real gut punch comes afterward. Sitting in his prison cell, Kang is perfectly content because he proved he could conquer the world. Then his son Marcus breaks him out. Instead of celebrating, Kang takes his son to a hidden chamber aboard a ship that serves as a kind of a morgue. Inside there are 22 identical corpses, each one a failed version of Marcus from previous timelines. Kang reveals that he always knew Marcus had secretly helped Warbird because he had fallen in love with her. If Marcus had simply admitted it, Kang says he would have accepted the defeat and passed the Empire on to him, but Marcus lied to Kang. The betrayal is unforgivable, so he kills his own son without a second thought. When the Kang Dynasty was released, it landed in an incredibly unfortunate time. The story had already been planned long before the September 11th attacks, but the issues featuring the destruction of Washington, D.C. hit shelves shortly after. Marvel chose not to rewrite or delay the story. That timing gave the event a much heavier tone than anyone could have anticipated. Looking back now, it's widely considered as one of the defining Avengers stories and one of the high points of Busiek's run. I think that it's a fantastic event overall, even if it isn't perfect. The whole tri-rune understanding and triple evil subplot slows things down more than it should. When Kang has already conquered Earth, stopping to deal with space cult and a giant floating pyramid on the moon takes some of the momentum out of the story. Even so, the main plot more than makes up for it. Watching Kang systematically outthink the Avengers, force the world into surrender, and actually win, if only for a while, makes this one of the greatest Avengers stories Marvel has ever published. To wrap up our look at this era, we have to talk about an event that wasn't actually a crossover, but rather one of the boldest, most fascinating editorial stunts Marvel ever pulled. The Nuff Said initiative. Now if you look at the cover dates of these books, they all say February 2002. But because of comic book shipping schedule, these things actually hit shop shelves in late 2001. This was the brainchild of Editor-in-Chief Joe Quesada, who determined to prove that Marvel was entering a new, fearless creative age. The mandate set out to every single creative team across the entire line was deceptively simple, yet terrifyingly difficult. Tell a complete, high-stakes stories, using absolutely zero words. No dialogue, no thought bubbles, no caption boxes, and not even a single sound effect. The entire burden of the storytelling was thrown squarely onto the artists, forcing them to rely purely on pacing, framing, panel layouts, and character acting to carry this narrative. To throw readers a bone, each issue included a few pages of the writer's actual typed script at the back of the book, just so fans could flip to the end and make sure they didn't miss any major plot points. Because every single book participated, the results varied widely, but when it worked, it resulted in absolute masterpieces of visual storytelling. The undisputed crown jewel of the whole event was New X-Men number 121 by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. The plot features Jean Grey and Emma Frost telepathically diving deep into the comatose mind of Charles Xavier, because the entire issue takes place in a surreal, subconscious, psychic landscape. The complete lack of words actually made the story feel more atmospheric, eerie, and brilliant, cementing it as an all-time classic X-Men issue. Another massive standout was Amazing Spider-Man Volume 2 number 39 by J. Michael Straczynski and John Romita Jr. This issue took place right after Aunt May famously discovered Peter Parker's secret identity. Instead of a loud, dramatic screaming match, the entire issue is a quiet, emotionally heavy, and deeply human look at Peter and May processing the massive shift in their lives. Without a single word spoken, Romita Jr.'s artwork perfectly captured the grief, love, and unspoken understanding between them, proving that sometimes silence hits way harder than a wall of dialogue. When Nuff Said landed, fans' reception was incredibly mixed, but universally fascinated. On one hand, a lot of readers found it to be a bit frustrating gimmick, especially if they are paying full cover price for a comic they could flip through and read in about 90 seconds. If a book had a weaker artist who struggled with visual clarity, the plot could be completely incomprehensible without reading the text script at the back. But on the other hand, history has been incredibly kind to the experiment. It forced the industry to remember that comics are a visual-first medium, showcasing just how cinematic and emotionally resonant comic book art can be when you strip away the training wheels of dialogue. Honestly, I think it's an incredible concept, even if it is a little gimmicky in places. When you have top-tier artistic powerhouses like Frank Quitely or John Romita Jr. steering the ship, it results in some of the most memorable single issues of the modern era. It forces you to actually slow down, look at the acting in the characters' faces, and appreciate the sequential art for what it is. Sure, a few of the lesser-known titles struggled to make it work, but the fact that Marvel had the absolute guts to silence their entire line for a month just to see what would happen is exactly why the year of 2001 in comics was so special. And that's a wrap on 2001, where Marvel essentially looked at the rulebook and set it on fire. The thing that fascinates me about this year is how fearless the editorial team actually was. Look at Eve of Destruction. On paper, it's a total damage control, meant to bridge two creative runs. But there's something incredibly compelling about watching Jean Grey stitch together a makeshift squad out of whatever random mutants happen to be left in the building. The Kang Dynasty raises the stakes by doing the unthinkable. Kurt Busiek didn't just have the villain threaten the massive invasion, he let the Conqueror actually take the crown, forcing a literal global surrender that raised the bar for what an Avengers epic could look like. And Nuff Said remains one of the boldest creative stunts in comic history, stripping away all dialogue for an entire month just to prove that sequential art can hit so much harder when you turn the volume completely down. None of these experiments are flawless, and you can definitely feel the growing pains of a company trying to reinvent itself on the fly, but the willingness to take massive swings, defy expectations, and trust the creators is exactly why this transition period holds up so well. That's the real joy of digging through back bins. You find these unique pockets of time where the old rules don't matter so much anymore, and 2001 was the perfect catalyst for when modern Marvel was heading next. If you enjoyed this trip through 2001, do me a favor. Drop a like, leave a comment, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next episode. If you want to go the extra mile and support the research that goes into these deep dives, consider hitting that join button for a channel membership. It keeps the lights on around here, and as a thank you, you get your name in the shout out in the credits of every video. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.